7 causes of white smoke from exhaust and what it usually means. You start the car, and then you see it. White smoke from the exhaust. At first, you may think it is nothing serious. Maybe it disappears after a few minutes. Maybe it only happens in the morning. Or maybe it keeps coming back, and now you are starting to worry. That reaction makes sense, because white smoke from the exhaust can mean very different things. Sometimes it is harmless, sometimes it is a warning, and sometimes it is the first clear sign of a serious internal engine problem. That is why you should not guess, because one type of white smoke is normal. Another type can mean coolant is entering the combustion chamber, and if that is happening, the repair can become expensive very quickly. In this video, I'll show you 7 common causes of white smoke from the exhaust. We'll start with the more harmless cause first, then move into the more serious problems. And stay until the end, because one of the last causes on this list is often mistaken for an engine failure, even though the real source can be somewhere else. So before you panic, let's go step by step. Cause number 1, normal condensation on cold startup. This is the harmless one. On cold mornings or when the car has been sitting for a while, you may see a light white vapor coming from the tailpipe. That is often just condensation. Water naturally collects in the exhaust system, and when the engine starts, that moisture turns into vapor as the system heats up. This kind of white exhaust usually disappears after the engine warms up. It is thin, light, and it does not keep pouring out continuously. That difference matters because brief white vapor on a cold startup is very different from thick white smoke that continues after warm-up. So before assuming the worst, ask yourself one simple question. Did it disappear once the engine got warm? If yes, condensation may be all it was. Cause number 2, blown head gasket. This is one of the most common serious causes of persistent white smoke. The head gasket seals the engine block and cylinder head. It keeps coolant, oil, and combustion gases separate from each other. But if that gasket fails, coolant can leak into the combustion chamber. And when coolant burns, it often comes out of the exhaust as thick white smoke or white steam. This kind of smoke usually has a sweet smell, and it often does not go away quickly. You may also notice coolant level dropping, engine overheating, or rough running engine. This is one of those problems you should never ignore for long, because a small head gasket leak can turn into a much bigger engine repair if you keep driving it. Cause number 3, cracked cylinder head. This cause can look very similar to a blown head gasket. A crack in the cylinder head can let coolant enter the combustion chamber, and once that happens, you get the same basic result: white smoke from the exhaust, coolant loss, and sometimes overheating. What makes this problem tricky is that it may not be obvious at first. The engine may still run, the car may still drive, but the smoke keeps coming back and coolant keeps disappearing. Sometimes the crack only shows itself more clearly when the engine gets hot. That is why some drivers see worse smoke after the car warms up, not just when it first starts. This is not a small issue, and if it is ignored too long, it can lead to major engine damage. Cause number 4, cracked engine block. This is less common, but more serious. If the engine block itself cracks, coolant may leak into places where it absolutely should not be, including the combustion chamber. And once coolant starts burning, white smoke appears at the exhaust. A cracked block often comes after severe overheating, freeze damage, or heavy engine stress. And unfortunately, this is one of the most expensive causes on the list. You may notice the same general signs as a bad head gasket: persistent white smoke, coolant loss, overheating, and sometimes milky oil. The reason this cause matters so much is that many drivers assume all white smoke is just a gasket problem, but in some cases, the damage goes deeper. Cause number 5, intake manifold gasket leak. This one depends on the engine design. On some engines, the intake manifold gasket can fail in a way that allows coolant to enter the engine. And if coolant gets pulled into the combustion chamber, you can end up with white smoke that looks a lot like a head gasket problem. This is one reason why diagnosis matters, because if you see white smoke, it is easy to jump straight to the most expensive conclusion. But the real source of the coolant leak may be somewhere else. You may still notice coolant loss, rough running, or a sweet smell from the exhaust. But the repair path may be different from a head gasket repair. That is why looking at the full symptom pattern is always smarter than guessing from smoke alone. Cause number 6. Too much fuel or injector-related issues. Now let's move away from coolant-related causes for a moment. White smoke is not always coolant. In some cases, a very rich fuel mixture or injector problems can create exhaust that looks white or light gray. Especially in certain lighting conditions, this is more likely if the engine is running badly, starting hard, or smelling strongly of fuel. A leaking injector, stuck injector, or serious fuel control problem can flood the engine and create a smoky exhaust condition. This may not be the most common cause of true white smoke, but it is still worth thinking about, especially if you do not have clear coolant loss symptoms. That is why color alone can sometimes fool people, because what looks white from a distance may actually be fuel-related smoke rather than steam. Cause number 7. Transmission fluid being pulled into the engine. This is the one many drivers do not expect. On some older automatic vehicles, a failed vacuum modulator can allow transmission fluid to be drawn into the engine. When that happens, the engine burns the fluid, and the exhaust may appear as white smoke or light bluish white smoke. This cause is not as common on many modern vehicles, but when it does happen, it can confuse people badly because they assume the engine has an internal coolant leak, when the real problem is related to the transmission side. If white smoke appears along with odd transmission behavior or unexplained transmission fluid loss, this possibility becomes more important. Now here is something very important. Not all white smoke means the same thing. That is the whole key. Light vapor that disappears quickly after startup is very different from thick white smoke that keeps coming back. So what should you look for first? Start with these questions. Does the smoke disappear after the engine warms up? Or does it stay there? Does it smell sweet? Are you losing coolant? Is the engine overheating? Is the oil turning milky? Does the car run rough? Those clues matter because they help separate harmless condensation from a real internal engine problem. And if you are seeing persistent white smoke, coolant loss, sweet smell, rough running, or overheating, then you should start taking the problem much more seriously, because that combination often points to coolant entering the engine. And if coolant is entering the engine, the repair usually does not stay cheap for long. So let's quickly recap. White smoke from the exhaust can be caused by normal condensation, a blown head gasket, a cracked cylinder head, a cracked engine block, an intake manifold gasket leak, too much fuel or injector-related issues, or in some cases, transmission fluid being burned. Some of these are minor, some are serious, and some can become very expensive if ignored for too long. That is why white smoke should never be judged by color alone. You have to look at the pattern, because the real meaning comes from what the smoke is doing, what the car is doing, and what other symptoms show up with it. And now I want to hear from you. What did the white smoke from your car look like first? Only at startup? All the time? Sweet smell, coolant loss, or rough running too? Comment below with the exact symptom you noticed first. And if enough people mention the same issue, I'll make the next video on that exact problem.